Leonardo DiCaprio.
Miss Anne Hathaway.
Meryl Streep, the Iron Lady.
Alan Arkin in Little Miss Sunshine.
Kevin Costner.
Yes. The King's Speech.
Birdman.
I'm Connor Rold, and welcome back to another episode of Redoing the Oscars. And this week we're going to be looking at the 1994 Oscars, one of my favorite years, one of the best lineups for Best Picture, and talking about, though, specifically the Best Supporting Actress category, and why I think Uma Thurman for Pulp Fiction should have been the winner. We're redoing it on this week's episode of Oscars, which, if you're new to the series, we've been doing every single week, all the way back in the year 2015, year over year, looking at one of the major categories, whether that be Best Picture, Best Director, or any of the four acting categories, and talking about, at the beginning, some historical Oscars context, where we were at the time, what were the other winners, then my alternative nominated pick, someone that was nominated at the Oscars that I think should have won, and then talking about an alternative non-nominated pick, celebrating a performance that wasn't even nominated that I think probably should have if we're redoing things based on some of my personal preference. And then trying to figure out at the end of the video, did the Academy make the right decision? Yes, these are my personal preferences. This is what I would do to kind of redo things and rejigger things based on how I think makes sense. But would it make sense in terms of the general public? Would it make sense in terms of what people think? Is the legacy of my winner better than the actual winner? All that stuff we can get into at the end of the video. And if you want to hear my thoughts on any of those individual categories, feel free to use the timestamps in the description below. And as always, I love to hear your thoughts. Please let me know in the comments down below whether or not you agree with my selections, what your personal selection would have been. Would you have gone with someone else in the supporting actress category? Or would you have redone maybe, let's say, the supporting actor category, or even Best Picture? Feel free to do that as well. But without further ado, let's get into things, starting off with some of that historical Oscars context. This is the 1994 Oscars, one of my favorite years because it's a fun debate of what the winner should have been. Obviously, the Best Picture goes to Forrest Gump, but you also had Pulp Fiction nominated and Shawshank Redemption, and I think the three of those movies are legendary movies. Personally, I probably would have gone with Shawshank. But then you also have, a couple of other great movies as well nominated. Quiz Show, which is maybe not as well seen as something like Forrest Gump, but it's also a very excellent drama. Four Weddings and a Funeral is a romantic comedy, and yet it's so well beloved and was so well done, it got nominated for Best Picture. So this is really sneakily one of the best lineups in Oscars history in terms of the five that were nominated here. And especially those top three, which are all kind of iconic movies in their own right. And yet, the performances that won this year were kind of hit or miss. It was a little bit weird to recognize such a great Best Picture lineup and then not have many of those performers in those movies really compete. Now, I think they got Best Actor correct. Tom Hanks for Forrest Gump, an iconic performance. People are still, dressing up as Forrest Gump for Halloween. It has actually surpassed, I think, the boomer generation being in love with it, and now has actually gone, particularly internationally, to the younger generation, and that is still a legendary movie. A legendary actor. I'm glad that an actor like Tom Hanks has 2 Oscars. I think he is of that caliber. Even though it came within a couple of years back to back here, he's still very deserving, in my opinion. Then we go on a bit of a downslide. Best Supporting Actor went to Martin Landau for Ed Wood, which is actually a performance I like quite a bit. I know it's controversial online just because Samuel L. Jackson was also nominated for Pulp Fiction, and that's definitely, I think, the more iconic character and an absolutely beloved film. So a lot of people, if they were redoing the Oscars, they would maybe pick that category. That being said, I think if you've seen Ed Wood, you know how great Martin Landau is. It's just unfortunate that Sam Jackson hasn't won an Oscar yet, so people kind of look at things and go, hey, why don't he just win there for his most iconic role? It would be actually a category that I would usually pick in terms of an iconic actor who's never won before in their iconic role. Why not going with that? But I just genuinely like Ed Wood, and I think Martin Landau's fantastic in the film, and some of these other categories I thought made a little bit more sense. Best lead actress went to Jessica Lange for Blue Sky, which is a fascinating movie and story. It's not a great movie, and she's okay in the film, but it was a movie that was shot in 1990 and it wasn't released until 1994. And the director of the movie, Tony Richardson, died in 91. So this is 3 years after the director of the movie died that it ended up actually getting released. It doesn't get any other nominations except for Best Lead Actress, and wins. I think in many ways it was just a celebration of Jessica Lange, who had been nominated 5 times in a little over 10 years. So she's had a really dominant run, and I think there's just a tense amount of appreciation and respect for her as an actress, even though if you go on with her nominations, they are filled with a lot of movies that don't really exist. They're not necessarily the best movies, even though she's usually pretty good in them. This is a category that I would love to redo. That being said, I looked at the other nominees, and I don't have a lot of passion for Jodie Foster and Nell, or Susan Sarandon, The Client, or some of these movies that just don't necessarily kind of are popular anyways. They're similar to Blue Sky, Tom and Viv, the Miranda Richardson movie, that exists in the same amount as Blue Sky, which is to say, not really at all. So that brings us to Best Supporting Actress, the category we are redoing today. The performance that ultimately did win was Diane Wiest for Bullets Over Broadway, which is a movie I like and a performance I like, but a bit of an odd win just because this isn't necessarily Woody Allen's best film. I wouldn't necessarily say it's definitely not his top 5, maybe his top 10, but not his most iconic movie or anything like that. And Diane Wiest had won actually for a better performance and a better movie in Hannah and Her Sisters a little under 10 years ago, about 8 or so years ago, before she won again for this. So it seems a little bit odd to reward her so soon after, especially in the history of things. So if we were to redo it, we don't necessarily need to give Diane Wiest a second Oscar. Instead, I think we should give the Oscar to my alternative nominated pick, which is Uma Thurman in Pulp Fiction. And this is similar to the Samuel L. Jackson side of things, an iconic role from an iconic actor. Now, an actor that hasn't necessarily worked in as many great movies in the 2010s and onwards, but she had this period here from, I would say, 88, starting with Dangerous Liaisons, up until, 2003, when you have both Kill Bills, and you have Gattaca, and you have Pulp Fiction. I mean, she was a very exciting actress and is in a lot of great iconic movies during that time period. So why not give her an Oscar, rewarding her and recognizing her for that? And I do think that this like Samuel L. Jackson for his role, and even more so, Uma Thurman is associated with Pulp Fiction as Mia Wallace. And what I love about the performance is that it is a classic femme fatale character archetype that is elevated into a sense of coolness. When I think about Pulp Fiction, I think about the word cool. It's stylish, it's exciting, but just how everyone looks and talks and acts, and how intelligent they all seem and how unique their words are, they all just kind of seem cool and of a different status than just the everyday person. It's an elevation of reality into this sick kind of crime, fascinating world that Tarantino is able to put together. And when you watch the movie, especially if you've never seen the movie, she's the poster, she's got the Halloween costumes, you think she's the lead actress, and yet she's not. I mean, she's not necessarily in a lot of the movie, and she's good, though, for when she is in the movie. And speaking about that femme fatale, when I think of a traditional femme fatale, in a noir or what have you, you have this ability to seduce and have this beauty and this ability to have the seduction and to entrap our kind of main characters into this web of lies and deceit and desire. And she's able to achieve all of that. Just in her kind of sly way of speaking, in the way she clearly knows the power that she holds over, John Travolta's Vincent Vega. But what's interesting about her is that she's not just using her looks. She's not just using her beauty, which is what traditionally femme fatale, just, one look at our main protagonist and they're hooked. And she's got that too. She has that kind of a aura and swagger, but it elevates into a sense of the coolness. It's not just her beauty that someone's attracted to. It's her life. It's her view on the world. It's her style. It's her opinions. It's kind of everything that she is as a person, more so than it is necessarily just her. It's just her complete life and what she's living in, and that desire to kind of, like a siren, kind of get drawn closer to. And I think what Uma Thurman is also able to put on is the understanding that Mia knows the power that she has. She's like a cat playing with her food. She understands the power that she holds over Vincent Vega, her kind of a bodyguard. And now she can kind of do whatever she wants. And because she's the boss's wife, that she can kind of get away with anything, and she will, and she plays and toys with that kind of a sexual tension that's going on between the two, and the tension of, I can do whatever I want, and you kind of tell me I shouldn't do that, but ultimately I have that power. The fact that they're clearly attracted to one another, and that kind of a game of will they, won't they, the seduction, the kind of tension that the two characters have with each other. You have the crazy elements at the end when she, ODs, and the movie picks up at that pace, but so much of it is just smooth and clear and kind of sexy and just absolutely alluring. And it's a perfect marriage, I think, of a great character and then a performer like Uma Thurman. Because it's easy to write on a piece of paper, she's the coolest person who's ever lived. But then it's another thing to actually embody that and to have that sense of confidence and swagger that she has throughout the movie so that we're believable. And that whenever she's not on screen, I'm constantly watching the movie and going, okay, where's Mia Wallace? Why are we watching someone else? Who cares about this? Let's get back to, her and her world and wanting to be around her. And in a movie that is so cool, she is in many ways the epitome of that cool. So it's an iconic performance and another underrated one just because she doesn't necessarily have a big emotional speech, let's say, and she's not in a lot of the movie when you rewatch it. But when she is in there, she stands out so brightly and is such an iconic character and a great actor during this period. So why not? Why not reward her? I'm going to go with Uma Thurman for Pulp Fiction as my alternative nominated pick. But now, talking about my alternative non-nominated pick, someone who wasn't even nominated at the Oscars, and in my opinion, probably wasn't even considered for the category, would be Alfre Woodard for Crooklyn. This is an underrated 1994 Spike Lee joint, one of my favorite of his movies. I know not a lot of people have seen it, but it is one of his best, and it is his kind of building roman in the sense that it's his personal life story in many ways. It feels like memories that he's drawn from the point of this little girl played by Zelda Harris, but really more so from the perspective of her and her siblings, and the family that she had, her mother, played by Alfre Woodard, her father, played by Delroy Lindo, and their life in the 70s in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, Bedford-Stuyvesant. And what Alfre does well in this movie is I think she's able to treat a traditional kind of a mom figure and give her a sense of three-dimensionality to her, in that she is both able to be strict and serious, but also have the warmth, also some of the gentleness, depending on who she's interacting with and the moments that she's interacting with. And that's what I find fascinating about her, because in a lot of the scenes, she is strict, and she's not always the best, and she's hitting her kids and being very serious with them, and kind of putting them in line. And because the movie's from the perspective of the children, we see a lot of those scenes, and she's good at that, and she's scary, and if she was my mom, I'd listen to her. But you also have moments with her and Delroy Lindo, and she's a little bit more gentle, a little bit more softer. And then there's also times in which she's, maybe in public interacting with neighbors, and she defends her kids 100% and has their back. You saw one scene in which she's criticizing them and she knows that they're, making trouble, but in real life and in person, she's going to defend them 100% and kind of defend her own kids and her household in that sense too. So she can be fiery in this movie. She can be very serious. She can also be a little bit more playful and energetic and showcase this mother as a three-dimensional figure of someone just trying to, keep the family unit together in a time of turbulence within the marriage, within the kind of community that they're in. And so much of the movie is these little kind of vignettes, and Alfre is able to essentially take what is a viewpoint from a child's perspective of a story and give it a sense of reality, give it a sense of this is a deep person with thoughts and feelings, and not just Spike Lee remembering his mom as being, a strict person. She's able to bring a little bit more complexity to that performance. And she's always been good. So why not nominate her, or maybe even give her the win? She was nominated in the 80s, early 80s for one of her first performances, and has been working, for 40 years now and doing great stuff even up to today. She's never bad, and it's kind of a shame that she wasn't rewarded really for any of her great performances in the 90s, and 92 Passion Fish, or 94 Crooklyn. I mean, this is a peak of Alfre Woodard, and they just, the Oscars weren't really in her bag, unfortunately. But to end off the video, did the Academy make the right decision? And I'm going to go with more of a definitive no. I like Bullets Over Broadway. I don't mean to disparage Diane Wiest, but it is a weird kind of a win in the sense that she had already won one less than 10 years ago. What's always weird to me is that they kind of recognize Pulp Fiction, right? Like the Academy nominated for Best Picture and Best Director and Screenplay. Like they recognize it as like a great achievement. They nominated Samuel L. Jackson and Uma Thurman, and in a movie full of great performances and iconic performances and one-liners and coolness, it's amazing that the Academy didn't also go like, and also they should win for supporting acting categories. Like it's weird that you have, Blue Sky wasn't nominated for Best Picture, wins. Same thing with Bullets Over Broadway, right? Same thing with even Ed Wood. You would think, oh, they like Pulp Fiction a lot, so they gave it a Best Picture nomination and a couple of acting wins as well, and they gave Forrest Gump an acting win and, something like that. But they didn't do that, which I find fascinating in hindsight just because they recognize that it was an important, culturally distinctive and unique voice in a great movie, but then to not nominate or not win the performances always was a weird situation. So the fact that Uma Thurman is a great actor, and the fact that her character in this movie still gets Halloween costumes, and this is her most iconic role, I think looking back on it from a historical legacy perspective, this probably was a bit of a mistake. And if the Academy were to redo things, I bet they would go with Uma Thurman. But let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are in terms of this category. Stay tuned to next week, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Mondays. There's always going to be a new video. Guess what? Next week's going to be covering the year 1993. And then next thing you know, we're almost into the Oscar season now. Only a few more weeks before we get back into the 11th season of Old's Oscar Countdown, predicting the Oscars for the upcoming season. So Oscars into Oscars. This is an Oscars channel. We have a great Oscar-loving community here, so feel free to stick around for that. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.